many of you who have attended our webinars in April know that the question we were asking all month was how concerned you were about survival in the month or 6 months ahead. And at the beginning of the month, a healthy percentage were very concerned. And by the end, a very small number were. But it is interesting in absolute terms to see that decreased sales are still the big, are the top challenge. So, and we also wanted to ask supply chain, but the wrong survey got up just now. We'll go into that on Thursday, but this is a very helpful thing to understand. I just want to remind you all, particularly those who were not a part of last week's incredibly successful HEI, if I do say so myself. We had 14 companies pitching on Friday, and we had 12 of the 14 left with a roster of investors willing to sit down with them. We had some fantastic cases, some incredible presentations from retailers and wholesalers, and current sort of trends in the marketplace. And it was just super exciting. But as I was starting to say, we announced then that we will continue this series through May, and we've kind of built a schedule around interests that you all have submitted. So obviously we'll have Elliot here in just a moment, but my friend Danny Meyer, who has been in the news quite a bit. He was on 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago, owing to his need to let over 2,000 employees go and watch an entire business that he had built over the decades really go into absolute pause. And it'll be interesting to talk to Danny about the whole food service piece and how he's adjusting and adapting what he sees coming. Wayne Wu, I think it really doesn't need much introduction. Wayne is truly everywhere. But Wayne has, in addition to being the general partner of VMG, the VC group, Wayne spends a huge amount of time talking to operators and to retailers, and has some very interesting observations about where the market is going, what are likely to be the strong trends coming out of this, and what are likely to be dead ends. And certainly it'll be interesting to hear a VC, as a very seasoned and grounded VC, talk about his essentially investment priorities based on those insights. And then we've got two wonderful entrepreneurs, Jane Miller, who's been around in the industry for in a number of roles, but is currently the CEO of Lily's Sweets, and Marcy Zaroff, who is the founder and CEO of the Eco Fashion Corp. But Marcy also has worn many, many hats, literally, because she's been in the fashion space. So this is our next four, and we look forward to having you. I want to get right to Elliot, and I'm going to let Elliot let you, give your illustrious background to everybody. What I want to say is that Elliot has been a dear friend, a really important colleague. My only regret about Elliot is I met him 30 years too late, because I really needed Elliot and what he's doing with TIG back in my first decade. And you'll hear why I'm saying that right from Elliot in a moment. But Elliot's been participating in the HEI now for a couple of years. He came over to New Zealand, he and his wife, to join us for the last November for our HEI. And Elliot and I sit on a board together. We do a fair amount of consulting and advising, and now some investing together. And I just find that you, Elliot, are a real jewel. You are someone who has a breadth of grounded experience, which right now everybody needs. We're dealing with extremely practical issues, and if you sort of summarize that first slide, that survey slide, it's obvious. I'm sure supply chain will get a heavy check off, but it's certainly obvious that navigating the world where you began your career in sales is the most troublesome for folks. So Folks, our format here will be that Elliot's going to share with us sort of lessons, learnings, insights, do's and don'ts from his client base and from many of his activities. Then we will have a little bit of a discussion. And as Julie said, please do use the Q&A function as Elliot is speaking. If you've got questions for us, or particularly for Elliot, put them in the Q&A and we will spend time discussing them and some of our other questions that come up in the sort of second half of this. So with that and no further ado, I welcome Elliot Begoun. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Gary. Well, first of all, thanks for those kind words. That's awesome. I was laughing because we were talking about prior to starting that I got a couple emails wondering how could we possibly be spending more hours together on Zoom after Thursday and Friday of last week. But here we are, and we're going to do it again. I'll tell you, just to share everyone a bit about my background, but that's the boring part. So I'd rather spend most of the time trying to answer the questions that are salient to you. But I've been in this business for 30 years, and ironically, Gary and I figured this all out with Bob, that my career started in the yogurt business too, and with Colombo yogurt way back in the late 80s. And I think Bob and I were almost circling the same orbit at the time, which is odd. And spent my, the bulk of my career in sales, marketing, supply chain, C-suite, and so forth. And about 7 years ago, realized that I was feeling tired of being in corporate life, and kept looking at the entrepreneurs in this space and really admiring all of the work and all of the effort that they were undertaking to change the world, change the way we were feeding the world, change the way we were taking care of the planet. And I felt it was my duty, my opportunity to come serve those entrepreneurs, those founders, and give them the 25 plus years at that point of hard fought lessons and experiences that I've learned, try to provide that insight to them and hopefully help them avoid a few minefields and brick walls along the way. And I think what was surprising to me is that I entered this thinking I'd be a teacher and found myself instead being the student. And I continue to learn from founders every single day. And I think, one of the things that you and I both recognize, Gary, is that we learn from each other and from this whole ecosystem daily. And so when people say, oh, there's answers here, they're really not my answers. They're your answers. It's the benefit of cross-pollination. I get to see and come across and be surrounded by a lot of people who are really, really smart, who are doing great things, and get to take that information in and assimilate it and share it. And that's really what I want to do here today, and try to offer any suggestions or feedback that we can to help navigate this period of massive uncertainty. So.
Excellent. Fire away. The floor is yours.
So let me talk a little bit first. Let me explain what we do, because for those who are listening and don't understand. So at TIG, what we do is we come alongside early stage emerging brands in the natural product space, and our entire job is to help shepherd them through what is affectionately known as that valley of death, that space between pre-seed and seed stage to Series A, where you're trying to become a self-sustaining business that is able to scale and grow. And along that way is where you begin to see the pitfalls, the challenges around raising capital, around growing the business, around doing all the things that are necessary to bridge that gap. And that gap in the last 6 to 8 weeks has just gotten deeper and wider. And what we're seeing now is that there's even more pressure on the top things that we listed here. Decreasing sales is obviously, I think if you look on the continuum, you've got some brands that are having incredible sales and other brands who are feeling left out. And it's really the cause of the symptom of the same cause. And that's where people are just changing their consumer buying habits, and retailers are changing their habits very quickly. And as a brand, you have to recognize that. So what we're seeing is you have to figure out a new plan for discovery. If you want to drive your sales right now, you can't rely upon the old tried and true discovery methods. So that, that means rethinking promotional strategy. That means rethinking where that discovery physically takes place. Instead of that being in the retail grocery store, it may be online, it may be in other forms. And that's both now and in the future, as well as how do you create how do you tell your story? You've lost a lot of your storytelling capability in store without the ability to do demos, without the ability to be at some of the events that are happening. How do you tell the story? So those are the things that I would focus right now quickly, is how do you become more nimble and more adept at driving discovery? How do you transition? One of the interesting things that's taking place, and I was waiting for this to happen, is we seem to have hit a tipping point when it comes to e-com. If you look at studies like Bricks meets Clicks prior to this, they were estimating that I think it was 6% of sales of grocery items were sold online. A recent analyst that I spoke with and another study that I saw has that number around 40%. And folks are saying somewhere between 20 and 25% is where it's going to level out. If that's the case, if that's a seed change, that's a seed change that excites me for early stage brands, because it's democratized. You have just as much of an opportunity to be found and discovered, to be tried, to build your tribe than any other brand does online. You're not going to be filtered through buyers, distributors, brokers, shelf space. All of those filters are removed, and it really just becomes how well can you tell your story to a consumer base that story finds its home. So, do you want to hit questions or just keep talking about key?
I think some of the key lessons and learnings.
Okay.
And maybe some examples of the solutions. And maybe while you gave me a moment, let me also say right away 2 questions have come to my mind from those comments. One is, of course, yeah, it is more democratized, but it's also a whole lot more crowded now, right?
Absolutely.
I know at Stonyfield, they had the run of the roost there for a long time, and now people are getting, blasted. You go on Instagram, you're getting constantly, hit. And then to put it more positively, I think it would be helpful, because I know a little bit of your client base, for people to hear about some of the, to me, little companies have some advantages here of being more human, more touchable, more perceived as real than do larger brands.
That's right. That's right. More authentic.
So yeah, exactly. And I think people are wanting their precious dollars right now, especially with the financial insecurity, to go more to brands that they really can trust, they feel a connection with. So, I think some anecdotes would be what people want to hear.
So let's talk first about the question around the space being more crowded. Just as absolutely, I mean, I think we all are seeing the people that are vying for our attention in digital form has increased dramatically, but so has the amount of time that we're spending on those platforms. And the truth of the matter is, we don't need a very good batting average to affect a pretty big change. So you can actually, the fact that there's more people in the space, it's crowded, it's busier, just means that you need to be very narrow in your focus, and you need to hit your message and hit it hard, and your consumers will find you. So, I mean, I'll give you a story about a brand. This is, let's talk about a small brand that was really going to use Expo West as its launch, right? So Expo West was its launch. It had been building up for 2 years to do that. It had been doing some trial in the market, and their whole plan was to go to Expo West, have some very productive meetings with buyers and investors, and then they were going to really leverage events to be the way that they were going to get their word out. So they were going to be marketing heavily at places like Coachella and Bonnaroo and large, athletic events, marathons and so forth, as well as really focus in on trying to be travel heavy, so at airports and so forth. So needless to say, when they arrived in Anaheim, their entire go-to-market strategy disappeared on them. And what they recognized quickly was that they could retrench or just retreat and hold and wait, or reinvent themselves. And so this is what I have been really preaching and trying to get everybody to understand, is that our job as entrepreneurs right now is to find opportunity amidst this chaos. There's going to be a place that you can do something different. And that's the advantage of being a small, nimble brand, is you can do it fast. You can do things and try it. And so what they wound up doing is saying, forget all this. We're just going to be a digital native brand. We're just going to not even try to go brick and mortar at all. We're going to build the best digital presence that we possibly can. We're going to take that money that we are investing in physical events and invest it in a great digital team. And we're going to tell our story in a way that's compelling and interesting. And they've done really well. And now they probably won't ever leave digital to build this brand until they get to that point of ubiquity where they can move into retail. And it was just that kind of pivot. So, to me, what is key, the brands that are surviving to thrive, that's the goal, right? It's not to just hunker down and shelter in place, but it's to position yourself to come out the other end of this in a way that you can thrive. Those brands are looking right now, how do we iterate? How do we change the way we're going to market? Where is our consumer? How do we become more capital efficient? These are all the questions that they're asking and seeking solutions to. Mm-hmm. And, I think one of the biggest changes that we're going to see is that the premium on capital efficiency, your ability to use $1 in of capital to create X number of dollars in revenue, is going to be the measurement stick that is the predictor of future viability. When we look back on this moment of time, the brands that were using this time and were capital efficient and effective are going to be the brands we're still talking about. And the brands that kept trying to do the same old thing and spend their way out of this problem are going to be the ones we don't remember.
And just in that case, first of all, I presume they're not perishable, but and it'd be helpful to hear of some of your perishable clients. But what specifically is working for them?
So specifically, it's just one was in this particular brand. You're right; it wasn't perishable, and they were built well for e-com, so the economics worked. But the number one thing was immediately getting out there and starting to message to their consumers, starting to talk to them, and using what is Gary, I think, is the number one superpower that a emerging brand can use, and that's empathy. They really stopped and said, what are our consumers dealing with right now? They're dealing with uncertainty. They're dealing with boredom. They're dealing with, concern about their immune health, about their overall health, all of those things. And they started messaging, using that empathy to message directly to them, because we don't buy products just for products. We buy brands because we're emotionally attached to them. And to your earlier point, they were able to authentically give voice to those worries, to those concerns, and bring in people who were interested in solving problems that they already identified. So they weren't trying to get them to establish a new need. They were just simply meeting them where they were in an authentic way and talking to them. But I mean, don't be afraid of perishable products online. It's changing rapidly. There are ways that you can be effective online depending on where your product sits in terms of its price hierarchy. But, you can build a fairly effective 3PL network to find yourself within, 2 days ground of the vast majority of the populace of this country. And you can build potentially an economic model that makes it viable. And you'll be surprised what we're seeing. We have one brand, Spinato's Pizza. I mean, who would have thought about buying frozen pizzas online? And they're doing quite well online on Amazon, as well as through their own Shopify site. Because people want comfort food. People are willing to stock their own freezers to have something accessible. It's a better for you analog, so people want something that reminds them of those evenings, but at the same time does it in a way that promotes slightly better health. And they built a model that makes that not only affordable for the consumer, but profitable for them, and it works. So, and I think that's going to continue to grow.
We are going to need you to address profitability with Amazon at some point here, whenever it makes sense.
Yeah.
Your our profitability.
Yeah.
Not too worried about Amazon's profitability.
Yeah. I think they're doing just fine. And we could talk about that right now. Okay. So one, I'll tell you two things that are immediate best practices. One of them is going to be music to your ears, Gary, which is know your cash flow. I mean, if you're not every day or at least every week really working on your cash flow and understanding the cash implications of every decision you're making, you're putting yourself and your business at risk. It's that simple. There is no other KPI. There is no other measurement in my experience, and I would think you probably agree with me, or in yours, that is a better bellwether of your ability to survive and do well.
Yes.
And then the other is waterfalls. Anything that you're doing, you should understand exactly the waterfall of everything that comes out of it. And that's the one benefit of transacting business with someone like Amazon, is there is no hidden unknown cost. You know what it is. So you know what you're selling it for. You know exactly what their referral fee is. Say if your product's over $15, it's 15%. So 15% comes off. You can go right onto your Seller Central account and know exactly what your FBA, fulfillment fees will be. If you have a broker involved, you know what their fees are. If you built in an ACOS, advertising cost of sales, you know what roughly you are targeting and what your ad spend is, and you can control that completely. So there's no reason whatsoever that you can't start with that selling price that you want to sell and waterfall down to where your end price is and understand exactly your profitability. And if you're going into Amazon unprofitably, I mean, I'll be a bit of a contrarian and say, shame on you. There's no reason to do it. There's no reason to say yes to business that isn't profitable. Now, there may be times where you start that business, you can't look at it transactionally, but transaction by transaction. You have to look at in terms of it, in my opinion at least, as to lifetime value of a customer. So you're going to spend some money to acquire them. But the hope is that you get a decent enough repeat purchase level that over the length and the time that they're with you, that it's profitable. And your business online should be absolutely profitable. And if it's not on Amazon, then your challenge is more likely your configuration, the way you're packing it, than anything. So, Amazon does best with multi-packs. It does best with variety packs. And you have to find that sweet spot and put it there. And if, depending on your product, that might put pressure on driving trial. And then you have to be creative how you do that. So,
are you seeing new product acceptances? I mean, most of the little brands at your scale, but even some of the larger ones I'm seeing, have really been capitalizing on their own D2C. You talked about Shopify earlier. Are you seeing brands, these earlier stage brands who might not yet have a following, getting fairly regularly accepted into Amazon?
Well, I mean, if you do it yourself, if you do it through FBA, you don't need to be accepted by Amazon, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's only when you go into to Vendor Central, which I would encourage any small brand, and really they're not doing that much of it unless you're a very
Right.
large brand or in
Right.
pet
That's
food.
what I was referring to. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say that's the benefit, right? The benefit is you can go out there and put something on Amazon and find out fast if what you've built is going to have product market fit.
Yeah.
There's some things that you want to do, and I'm by no means an Amazon expert, but you want to make sure you own your trademark on Amazon because you want to be able to take advantage of brand registry, which gives you access to their enhanced brand content, their A+ content, because it helps you tell your story on Amazon. And there's a huge number of searches done on Amazon. I think it's like 55% of all searches are being done on Amazon. Betsy McGinn, who's great, who's really an Amazon guru, was telling me the other day that 62 or 63% of American households are now Prime, which is a staggering number in terms of penetration, and that conversion numbers on an Amazon on your storefront on Amazon are vastly larger than what they would be on your own website. So. And that's, the one thing I get asked a lot is, do I go on Amazon or do I do my own D2C? Or if I have both, do I drive more traffic to Amazon or do I drive it more to my own website? And I mean, there's nuanced reasons, but in general, the answer is yes, you do both.
Mhm.
You become agnostic about platform. You become agnostic about how your consumers find you, and you just make sure that the experience is different. So again, a huge number of searches originate on Amazon. So they're doing a lot of the customer acquisition work for you. They're bringing them to your front door. That's their job, and you're paying them a referral fee for doing just that. That's why they call it a referral fee. They're bringing you consumers to you. It's your job then to convert them. And then you do convert them, but there are going to be other consumers who are, not wanting to buy on Amazon or who want to have a direct relationship with you or for whatever reason want to buy from your website, and you want them to do that too. And sometimes they start on Amazon and migrate to your website, or they'll buy both places. So I think it's critical that you take an approach that you want to be where your consumers are, where they work, where they live, where they shop, where they play, where they talk. That's the job. It's to build concentric circles around your consumer.
Yeah. So let's pivot for a couple of minutes because we're getting some questions I want to get to. Let's pivot over to retail for a little bit.
Okay.
So last week, at HEI, we had Don Clark from Whole Foods giving one perspective, and then we had Corrine and Ben from Infra and NCG. For viewers, that's from the Independent Natural Food Retailers Association, and then from the National Co-op Grocers. And I was struck by the stark difference, right? Don, most of they've been just playing catch up. They're moving with the big movers. Their innovation, the portal has sort of been closed, but he can see it coming. But they're very excited about innovation. But their hands are a little bit tied because of the scale. Over on the other side, you have the independents saying, we want deals, we want sales, we want promos. What's your deal? What's your deal? Because they see in the grassroots communities out there, they're competing with grocers. They're with 25 million new Americans on unemployment and so forth. They're concerned about, and they've always been about, affordability. And I'm just curious, as you look at your range of clients, and I'm not sure you ever said, by the way, I know we understand that they're the valley of death, but I don't know how many and how many categories you advise in these days. You might want to level set us, but are there certain retail channels that you are seeing as more favorable, more receptive, better advised for people, either littler brands or even larger brands bringing innovation to the market?
That's a very complex complex question. So first of all, just to answer the level set. So our category wise, we're in beverage, food, personal care, pet care, all in natural products, and our brands usually range in size on the very small end, sub $1 million, to about 8-10 million. That's kind of our size.
Okay.
In terms of retail, one of the things that again, I tend to think differently, Gary, that, is I don't view any of this as separate channel strategy, right? I view this as consumer continuum, and along the continuum where your consumer is are various waypoints. And Whole Foods is a waypoint, as is Infra, as is NCG, as are some of just the mom pods that can make a big business, as is e-com. All of that is on that same continuum that your consumer goes up and down to shop. And the question is, where on that continuum and in which of those waypoints are you best able to or most likely to intercept your consumer in an effective way? That's what I'd be thinking and how I'd be addressing this. So if Whole Foods is the best way for you to intercept your consumer, then even with everything that's going on, Whole Foods makes sense. I think with what's happening with the smaller retailers, it's the same thing that is happening with the smaller brands. They're pivoting faster, they're moving quicker, they're reacting and using their agility to their advantage, and you can help them do that. And again, it gets back to that word I mentioned before, which is empathy. Understand what they're going through too, right? Those retailers have some real concerns. They have concerns about, one, store count, their customer count coming through the doors. Basket size is up, but the number of shopping trips is down. And what's going to happen with a lot of their consumers being on extended period of discomfort when it comes to their own incomes, and what's going to happen to their shopping behaviors. So talking about that in that language to your buyers is critical. What are you going to do and what can you do to either bring new consumers to their stores, keep their consumers in their stores, intercept them in ways that is valuable to you and valuable to them? And that's what I'd be looking at.
Yeah. Well, it's just, in other words, what we've always needed to do, but just with a bit sharper point. So we're getting a bunch of questions, and we're into that period where I want to be sure we get to as many as we can. So, and folks, feel free to keep them coming. We'll do what we can. But just in order, so Sydney asks, do you think certain products are a better fit for online, i.e. a paleo bar that fits a niche, selling better than impulse snacking? How do you do that?
I think one of the things that really is important online, or just in general, if you want to be effective with your messaging and be able to be, getting back to that term I've used a million times already, capital efficiency, is you have to have a vibrant ecosystem around whatever you're solving. So, for example, paleo has a pretty active lifestyle tribe. So you're able to become a voice in that tribe and affect interest. But it's also a tribe that is fairly crowded and is quick to ferret out any pretenders. And so it's a degree in which you can actually show up there authentically and be viewed as truly that you can play. So I look for ecosystems. Where can we tell our story amongst a motivated cluster of people? And the larger your ecosystem is, and the smaller you are as a brand, the less effective you're going to be. The more niche you are online in that messaging, the more impactful you're going to be. And it's somewhat counterintuitive, because we talk a lot about addressable market, using their industry lingo, we want to be as big of addressable market. And it's true long-term that you want to be able to address a large market. But in the short term, for the efficacy of your marketing and your go-to-market strategy, you want to find as narrow a niche that you can own, kind of have that domain monopoly or position. If you can do that, then you can really drive trial, and then you just slowly expand out. So the question is a great one, and I would just really look at where there's an ecosystem that's underserved or a need that's unmet in a place where you can build a kind of evangelical tribe and own it. And I don't think it's necessarily by category. I think it's by need state or problem being
No, I
solved.
couldn't agree with you more. You know, you talked about, and we're going to get to a question about this, about messaging on empathy, but I think product selection on empathy is critical right now. You know, if you've got immune somewhere on your label, you know, get it out there. If you have probiotic, if you, even organic, of course, is doing very well, as the universe of consumers who recognize that step one in keeping your family safe is avoiding toxins, right?
Yep.
But Peter Kay, I'm just saying, I agree with you about picking your lane and really going hard at it. You and I are on the board of a company that, you know, has a superior nutritional proposition, and obviously there's all kinds of other things that we could be doing with that brand, but it's just going really hard at handy, convenient nutrition right now. Is she's got to own that.
Well, and I said this at HI, and I said, to me, it's an important thing to do is you have to discern what's important versus what's interesting. You know, I mean, there's a shitload of interesting things to be doing. Let's face it. But what can you do that's really important, that's going to move the needle, and focus on that? And, you know, and using that example, you know, it doesn't mean that you're not opportunistic. You own the swim lane. You do that really, you know, well, and you deliver, you know, messaging very effectively there. But it's going to naturally bleed over. There's going to be other opportunities, and you could always examine those yeses at that moment in time. But you're not spending or diffusing all of your efforts trying to chase all of the things that are interesting. You're just narrowly focused on what's important, and you go after it and try to own that space.
Yeah. So Peter Kay, former marketing VP at Honest Tea, is wanting to push a little bit further on the messaging and empathy. He says, what right now are you seeing with your clients as the best channels to communicate that empathetic message? Email, social media, digital, or other? I will just quickly comment two things here from a $500 million company perspective, an organic company. They're finding that email is where they're just rocketing. You know, Instagram's crowded, a lot of messaging, Facebook, you know, a sea of advertising, but email is a place where, you know, in my career, social media began, just, you know, what's happening on the farm today, that kind of thing. But now it's where they're getting the most pickup and the most, what's the word? Not retweets, but, you know, the most echo.
Engagement.
Yeah,
most engagement
and re-forwarding. That's one example I want to mention. And another case, and here I invoked this example last week at the HEI, so I'll say it again. You know, Andrew at Orgain, talk about communicating empathy. They did such a brilliant thing. You know, the Orgain, of course, is protein powders, but also have these shakes. And frankly, in recent years, the powders have jettisoned ahead of shakes. And Andrew did this, and his team did this brilliant thing. They asked consumers all over the country to nominate a healthcare worker, a healthcare hero on the front lines, and they sent them whole cases of shakes to their hospital wing. And oh my gosh, I mean, you know, first of all, the social media exploded. They got tons of grateful photographs. I mean, this is the perfect on-the-fly beverage, right? But in turn, not only were these influencers or users becoming influencers, because of course they're talking to lots and lots of people who are, you know, patients and their families, but it was also just such a powerful statement of, being attuned to what's going on out there. We've seen the cheering for healthcare workers when they, end their shifts. And I think this word empathy needs to be taken literally. I think moms who need things to do with their kids in the morning, who are just trying to get breakfast on the table and figure out who's going to be Zooming with their teacher and who isn't, and, the dog and the pet, and some entertainment. Yesterday, I'll tell you, at Stonyfield, we have this wonderful day every May where the cows come out of the barn for the first time, and they literally prance, they literally spring. And so we're always there at the farm. It's literally like, this wonderful coming out thing. And I saw Organic Valley was doing the same thing. But, the pickup was great. That was empathy in terms of entertainment. So anyhow, Peter's asking about best channels from your vantage point.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'll answer it first kind of broadly, and I'll get more tactical. But I think the first answer is wherever you feel you can do that most authentically. So that's really important. And wherever your consumers are likely to engage. And that's different for every brand. I mean, some brands that are really catering towards the millennials and so forth, I mean, it is going to be on Instagram or Snapchat or now TikTok or others. For those who have a broader reach, it could be email. So I think it's wherever you can do it most authentically. And then the one thing I'll say around empathy is don't fake it, because if you get outed, it's just devastating. It looks so disingenuous. It's so bad for your brand. And listen, if your brand has always been kind of snarky and hardcore, giving them verbal hugs and I'm going to go over is very aligned with your brand. So make sure that you're staying within your brand voice and not trying to pander to a situation. I think there's always a risk of people having the mentality of never letting a good crisis go to waste, and trying to be too opportunistic. Tactically, though, I would say, the way I look at any interaction with consumers, so this is whether it's a physical interaction with them or a virtual interaction with them, it's around building concentric circles. It's like the old Venn diagram. You want to have overlapping places where you reach them so that you stay top of mind. This is not a moment in time to sell. This is not a moment in time to do anything that's too self-promoting or self-aggrandizing. It is an opportunity in time to stay top of mind. Yes. Or to be riding out the storm with them. People like to hang out with their friends when things are tough. Brands are our friends. And so just being with them in that way is a very important thing. Emails are great, short, pithy emails. One of the biggest mistakes people make around sending emails out is they don't send enough of them. So you send an email out and you look at how many people opened it and how many people clicked on it, and then you don't send another one out for a week. Think about how, using empathy again, think about how most people use their inboxes. If you don't respond to an email within the first 4 or 5 hours of it showing up in your inbox, it's gone. It's just out of mind. Yeah. 7 to 12 touches is what it typically takes to get somebody to act on an email. So we encourage our brands to set up an email sequence, very simple, under 50 words, and usually on a 3-day, 2 to 3 day cadence. And it's an auto sequence where it just keeps happening and you keep communicating with them. And it might have links to an article. Sometimes it's just, something that seems friendly, whatever it is, top of mind awareness, nothing more. But on this 3-day cadence, and the sequence gets interrupted when somebody engages with it, it stops, and then you can have that two-way conversation. But you keep that pulse going if you want to make it. And email is very effective.
Yeah, agreed. Jem's asking a very interesting question. We're obviously going to jump around. What's the usual time duration for emerging brands to get an ROI on investing in building online channels and growing sales to a level that covers costs? Jem also asked, do you find that gross margins are higher online? I think the answer is yes. But just with your brands, and obviously we're in a very particular time now where direct to consumer has had to become far more prominent in the mix. But do you counsel a time duration on getting to?
I don't cancel. I don't counsel on time duration because it's so difficult to predict. I do on establishing really clear assumptions. So listen, anyone at this in an early stage in the business, or really any stage, but the earlier you are, the more hypothetical any of your sales plans or growth plans are. I call them growth hypotheses. That's all it is. And the key is a good growth hypothesis is based on really good, measurable, trackable assumptions. So if in your growth hypothesis you build some assumptions that say, I expect to be spending this percent in acquisition and this percent in e-com fees and getting this kind of return, then what you do is you begin to look for, and you spread that out kind of over time. You begin to look for predictors or indicators, leading indicators that you're tracking in that way. So if you're tracking the relationship to revenue versus acquisition cost, you should see that revenues going up and acquisition cost per dollar of revenue generated is going down. And if you're measuring that, that's your indication that you're beginning to get that ROI. And again, I am not a fan of going into any transactional activity without an absolute clear path to profitability. I'm not afraid to invest on the front end, but if you're not confident that in the relative term you're going to see a path to profitability, then it doesn't make sense. So,
yeah, your profits are not necessarily retailers' priority. So
that's it. And yeah, margins should be better online, but you should be prepared to invest that margin into acquisition and keeping those consumers home.
Okay. Questions coming in hot and heavy. I'll keep them going. Lori, what resources do you recommend using to get started on Amazon?
I'm going to put a shameless plug in for one of our friends, which is Betsy McGinn, who co-authored a really, I think, kind of the most digestible book on Amazon, the Amazon Roadmap, which ironically you can buy on Amazon. I think that's a really good starting point so that at least you become an educated consumer. I also think that a lot of people try to do it yourself, the DIY approach to Amazon, and that's usually a mistake. First of all, just high level advice to any founder, you should understand what your highest value activities are and what they aren't. And those things that aren't your highest value activity, it's okay to make some investment to have some of those things done for you.
Yeah.
And Amazon is a very, very kind of transactionally specific thing that hiring a good Amazon expert to help you navigate through, and there's plenty, and I'm happy to share resources, and you can email me and I'll connect you to a few. But that's where I would start. But I would start first by educating yourself, and understanding how Amazon works. And Betsy's book is a great place to do that, because then when you're having conversations with potential partners, and that you're coming from a position of at least understanding what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah. Agreed. I really agree with you. And we need to clone Betsy at this point. Here's a question I think we can both swing at. Are you seeing any increase in angels coming back to CPG, or they all run for the hills with VCs holding onto their cash as a real hole in funding? Well, I'm going to just share, this is an anonymous attendee. We had 42 investors, as you know, Elliot, on all day on Friday. They were there from the beginning of the day till the end of the day. The VCs are telling me they need forums like the Hirschberg Entrepreneurship Institute, because their normal channels, their normal forums, their normal shows and so forth are not obviously happening. And a whole lot of them have obviously pulled cash out of the stock market, because it's clearly, not a terribly steady place to be. So they're sitting on a lot of cash. So I find that there is a lot of investing going on. You and I have been involved in multiple deals. I've been personally involved in more than I want to or can even possibly handle. So yeah, I think it's out there. And I should just make a plug here too. At the Hirshberg Institute, due to demand from these investors, we are going to create a portal in the next couple of weeks. Give us a little time. We're still recovering from 500 people in 15 time zones last week, but we're going to create a portal where you can submit a pitch, a one pager, and go fishing, and where we hope to build an audience, not just of VCs, of institutionals, but obviously for the size company that Elliot's talking about, for more angel, family office kind of funding. But anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, first of all, I agree with you. There's still money to be had. I mean, most of the VCs that you and I are both talking to still have the capital to deploy and still intend to deploy it. And many of the angels, you're right, are sitting in a different in a better cash position than they were before, because they were the ones that pulled out of the market. But I'm not going to deny the fact that raising money is hard as hell, and it's definitely harder now. And I'll give myself a shameless plug. I wrote an article for New Hope talking about the fact that you should have an uncertainty premium built into the marketplace, because the bottom line is investors are going to keep their powder dry unless they can get a deal. And there are some things that you can do creatively to take your deal and rise it to the top of the huge number of people asking to raise capital right now, and differentiate yourself that is not marginally impactful to your dilution. And so I think really thinking through your raise strategy and being smart about raising what you need to continue to prove your growth hypothesis, and do it in a way that says to investors, wow, I can't afford not to do this. I can't afford to wait. It is critical. And the other thing that we're considering doing, Gary, as well, is same kind of thing. I mean, all of our brands, it's the number one challenge in the non-COVID world is raising early money right now, because the funds have gotten bigger and the check size of those funds have gotten bigger, and there are lots of angels in this space, but there's angel fatigue. I mean, you can only look at so many decks a week or a month and get your arm around it. So, we're trying to cultivate more angels. You are as well. And what we're thinking about doing is kind of a monthly pitch sprint where like 3 or 4 brands will pitch for 5 minutes, 5-minute Q&A. And then we're just simply going to share that video. We'll invite any investors to attend. It'll be a Zoom. Anyone can attend live and ask the questions. But we will share that with the angels and the family offices, and they can watch in 30 minutes, 3 great brands pitch and be done. So I think part of it is the industry needs to be, we all have a responsibility to help find creative ways to be yentles and matchmake a bit and bring potential angels and brands together for conversations.
Yeah, and I might, this is not the time here as we're getting to the last 15 minutes to go into this in great detail, but I would just offer as a suggestion right now, valuation is difficult in the best of times, especially pre-revenue or early, but now it's really hard. Talk convertible debt. Don't, just slap a discount on. 20% has become sort of a standard, 20% discount when you do actually convert or do it a round or, do equity. But investors are willing to put their money to work, and that's a very easy way to enter. So
yeah, and I'm just really quick on that, because just to say, and 2 things too is look at all of those terms on convertible debt. So convertible debt, convertible note are safe. Discount, value cap, and valuation cap is just another form of a discount, and that's a whole nother topic of conversation that most people don't understand. Interest rate, those are all things that in the grand scheme of things have marginal dilution if you're done right. And then the other is figuring out, most investors, angel investors, like to put some money into a brand, see if that brand is really going to take off, and then have the opportunity to follow on and to make another investment. So building that into your offer and giving them something excited that if you're the right bet for them, that they have an incentive to follow on, and you're giving them that up front, is another way to look at it. So be creative, get some good advice on this one, because it's important that your offer, just like your product, is differentiated.
Yeah. All right. I got a couple of food service questions. We haven't talked much.
I love food service questions.
Yeah. Paloma and an anonymous asked these two questions. What do you think about food delivery services and opportunities for convenience packaged food to enter that space? I'm on the board of Blue Apron, as you know, and
Yep.
it's certainly as dynamic as could possibly be. And then an anonymous attendee asked, when do you think food service will come back as a viable channel for CPG brands? Should brands be thinking of this channel for 2021? So there's a prognostication question.
Yeah, I got to put my Swami hat on. I have no freaking idea really about when that's going to come back. It will obviously come back. And I think that when it does, it's going to take a while for them just to get back into some sense of homeostasis. So you've got to give them time. So I think if you're building pretty big plans for food service, my guess is to be a realist around it, not a pathological optimist, as Gary would say, and figure that, best case, they're looking at new products by mid 2021. That's just my personal view. And then as it relates to packaged goods being part of meal delivery, absolutely. I mean, I think more and more is going to show up at our door. That's a behavior that we've gotten used to even more so in this time. And when we go back to whatever it looks like after this, we go back to that busyness, that convenience of having things show up is going to only grow. And so I think figuring out how to do that, as well as I think things like click and collect are going to grow. And so, again, I don't think of things on a channel strategy. Think of it as a continuum, a consumer continuum. And you want to find which of those waypoints where your consumer intersects is best for you. And it's different for every brand, and just figure out which of those you can execute well on, and pick a few and go execute.
Okay. These are short, 2 tactical questions, one from Deborah. Amazon messed up on how they stored our product. We had to pull the product. We have our own shopping site and a great online team to tell our story. Sales are going in the right direction. Should we try Amazon again if we can't control how our product is stored and handled? What do you tell a client if they present you with that?
I don't know all the nuance, all the specifics, but the short answer is yes. You continue to try to figure it out. You could look potentially at doing seller fulfilled Prime, depending on where you are, and then control your own destiny if that need be. But again, it's a huge search engine for products, and the conversion rate is high. And so to be off that platform, you just risk having, an entry point to your brand not there. So.
Yeah, well said. Lori asks, having trouble being profitable selling bottled glass beverages online, shipping super expensive. Any suggestions?
Charge more. No, it is super expensive. Again, depending on what your go-to-market is. So one of the things that I would tell you is that you should either consider how you package it, in terms of not physically package it, because you obviously need to physically package it so it doesn't break, but how many in a package, how you're going to drive trial, and then start asking yourself whether you should geofence your shipping. And you can do that pretty effectively if need be, and look for good 3PL partners that are doing beverage right now in glass, and work with them. But we have a couple of brands. Tia Lapita hot sauce, for one, is shipping glass, doing very well now on e-commerce. And we've got a couple others, beverages and refrigerated beverages, that are going there, and it can work. It's a riddle, and it's a lot to do with what you decide success looks like.
Yeah, my son Ethan is moving very nicely with these packs, these multi-packs of his glass bottles. They're expensive, but they're very dollar dense. And again, it's 2-ounce glass, so it's not 16-ounce. So it's a different volume to.
And you also have to understand that when you have a sell price like that, you're not going to sell as much, but you don't necessarily need to sell as much to to be profitable. Right. And I would not, again, subsidize that business if don't sell below profitability online.
Yeah, here. ever.
Yep.
Okay, we're down to the wire here. While you are agnostic regarding platform, if you only have one bucket of money to advertise, so do you have so you have to make a choice whether to point them to your website or to Amazon. What would be your advice on that split?
I would put it first to Amazon, only because Amazon does a lot of the heavy lifting to get them there, and the conversion rates are higher.
Yeah,
It's hard to get people to move to your site quickly, and it builds over time. So that's what I would do
yeah.
if you had a limited budget.
Okay, here's a fascinating question, which I'll be interested in to see how our answers compare. Joanna asks, I've heard you speak about capital efficiency. Would you invest in a brand redesign right now if you were working on a new product pivot?
You want to go first? You want me to go?
Well, it so happens,
It
as
so
you know,
happens
we're on a board that is involved. I think it's a really good idea to redesign right now. I think it's a very good time. It is, I mean, I'm all for capital efficiency and cash flow, but it's a very complicated marketplace. It's, as Elliot, as you've laid out here, you have to really get it right, and you have to really repeat, and you got to hammer. And even still, we saw at the beginning, reduced sales is still, a reality for everybody. So I think before you get back on your horse to full gallop, now would be a good time to get it right. I would also say if there's a problem with your design, it's never smart to postpone that.
Yeah. And I would say capital, the way I define capital efficiency is every dollar of capital you bring in generates, X, the relationship of the ratio for dollars of capital brought in to revenue generated. And if your branding or your packaging is limiting your ability to transact into revenue, then you're not capital efficient. And so you need to take that make that investment to break that barrier and get it done. But
Yes.
Do it quickly, test, and if you're wrong, adjust. I mean, that's the benefit of the online world that we live in. You can test these things, or get it out in the hands of consumers in iterative form. Start right now. If you're in the middle of putting branding together, start building an email list of people that you can send packaging to, or visual concepts online, and get feedback from them before you ever go to print, and try to shorten the learning curve a little bit.
Here. Okay, last two, and then I've got a final one. And we've talked about this, but maybe you want to add, Madeline's asking, do you have any specific thoughts on maximizing loyalty if you're successful right now at capitalizing on the situation and attracting a lot of new customers buying on your website? How do you lock it in is what she's asking.
People love to be in the know. They like to be a part of something. So figure out a way to engage them, tastemaker, VIP things, ways that they get a say on, we just talked about it, packaging. They become, hey, be a part of our focus groups. Any new items, any new packaging, we're going to bring it to you to get your input. Give them ways that they can express how cool they are by extending, out to their friends. People like to be in the know and share with their friends things that are cool. So empower them to become your evangelist. That's a really important way to help them become loyal.
Good. Special release.
Yeah.
Last question, and here's a put on your Swami hat again, but do you see the C-store model changing further, as it was already starting to clean up their offerings? Do you think shoppers will move to more local and less crowded spaces? So I guess it's a two-part question.
I mean, I think C-stores are cleaning up. I mean, they're just like anybody else, any other retailer. They're having to answer to a changing, changing consumer expectations. And you see groups like 7-Eleven who's making a big push, testing their natural sets within their stores. I think it's going to take time before that's a big part of their offering, but I think it's a growing part. I do think we'll shop more local. I do think shopping's going to change for a while, just period. I think we're going to be a lot more prescriptive in our shopping trips. We're going to be a lot more rote. And that's why I come back to what I said at the beginning, is that I don't think that you can depend on things that used to be there for driving discovery and trial. And you're going to have to be innovative and creative around how can you do those two things, because those two things are going to be fundamentally important if you want to see your brand grow.
Super. So my last question for you is, if people are listening and would like to become a TIG client, how do they do that?
Great. Well, thanks. A couple ways. One is we have an application online at our website, which is www.tigbrands.com. Fill it out. We're also piloting a 8-week program that is aimed at trying to help brands learn how to build or become nimble, capital efficient, resilient brands. So we're kind of hoisting a new mascot up there called the tardigrade, which is like the most resilient, nimble species on the planet. And we think more brands should be building towards that than building towards the unicorn. So you can learn more about that on our website. And then, join our newsletter. We'll keep you posted on what we're seeing out there, and happy to do that. And Gary, as you know, I'm always happy, no strings attached, to have conversations with people. I feel super blessed to be in this space. And if there's, a way I can make a connection or answer a question or do anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, super. So Elliot, I like to sort of summarize some key points here. And frankly, it's impossible today because we hit so damn many. But
they're all over the place.
Let me quickly recap a couple, and if I have any wrong, just tell me it. So you work in the Valley of Death, the sort of pre-seed to Series A. Your advice that is for emerging brands right now is big priority is on figuring out a new plan for discovery, promo plans, refigure where that contact is taking place, refigure where that consumer can be found, fish where the fish are. We've lost a lot of traditional storytelling media, so be wise, and you're obviously recommending online and direct as much as possible. You made the point that 6% of grocery items were sold online pre-COVID, now 40+%, and that the marketplace is democratized. There's more opportunities to tell your story online now because there's frankly more folks there. Hit the message and hit it hard. There's more eyes on it. But you were saying that, for example, with email, that one needs to be 7 to 12 touches is what it takes to really get a message hit. And it would seem to me that a lot of the political candidates are fundraising are following your advice because it's insatiable, right?
Yes.
Let's see. Let's see. Oh, well, of course, the premium you were saying, and I thought this is so astute, and I know you've said it multiple times, but bears repeating that the premium, companies that put a premium on capital efficiency will be the predictor of future viability. And I think that's really true. This is about, we have to, survive through this period, and managing, holding on to your cash is critical. Immediately be messaging with your consumers and focus on empathy. Get where they are, speak to them in a language, and be brief. I loved your 50-word max on emails. You were saying regarding Amazon, the advantage of Amazon is no confusion about the costs. We know what they are, but on the other hand, don't go in unprofitably because you'll never recover from that. Fascinating statistics: 63% of Americans now on Prime. Boy, that's a eye opener, right?
American households, yeah.
American households. Sorry. Let's see. I think because I can't even read my own writing. I think those are the keys. Did I miss any major points?
No, I think everything's there, and I think it's just about being. As entrepreneurs, it's about being creative right now. Yes. Look for the opportunity amidst this chaos. It's there. It's there to be had, and if you can figure it out and be there first, you're gonna, when the veil is lifted and we begin to resume whatever life looks like after this, you'll have leapfrogged your competition if you're looking with that with those eyes.
Yes, indeed. All right, Carlene, if you wouldn't mind going back to the schedule for the balance of the month here, before we let Elliot go. Speaking of being creative, 4 incredibly creative founders, leaders, executives in a variety of different areas. I hope you enjoyed Elliot today as much as I did. And I promise if you did, you will enjoy each of these very different perspectives on the marketplace and sort of all about building wisdom. I will say at the very end of the month, I'm hoping to do a panel I asked Carlene to take the date off the 20th because it's not confirmed, but I'm hoping to get a group of chief marketing officers of leading established brands in the natural space to talk about what's working for them right now. I thought that even though, they have budgets that dwarf a lot of our revenues, still, I think there may be some jewels in there. So we'll see about that. But please join us for the remaining webinars, including this Thursday with Danny Meyer. Elliot, can't thank you enough. And I think people understand why we needed and wanted you here. You have a font of wisdom and insights and just a tremendous eye on the ground, which is what is needed now. So thank you again for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. And we're doing this tomorrow. It's a home and away series. So you're going to join me for our podcast, which is the TikToks, which we do on webinars. So if anyone wants to turn it around and put Gary on the hot seat.
It's really easy. I'm just going to
tomorrow's it.
Notes tomorrow. It's really simple.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Once again, thank you, Carlene. Thank you, Julie, the geniuses behind the scenes. And also our sponsors, Bank of America, the Januzzi Group, New Hope Network, and Whipstitch Capital. And we will hopefully see you all on Thursday. Stay safe, everybody.